Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's podcast, Taking Care of Business, with Dan Kelly, who is president and CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Thanks, Dan, for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Mario.
Well, some disturbing numbers just came out from the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy in Canada, showing that the number of bankruptcies, insolvencies taking place is starting to grow. First of all, your thoughts, Dan, on some of the numbers that you saw here just released.
Well, look, super troubling, but not super surprising, I will say. We've been predicting, and you and I have been talking about this for years, that there will be a back-end effect from pandemic-related restrictions and all the economic turmoil that lockdowns and other policies have brought. During the pandemic, bankruptcies were actually lighter than is normal because even bankruptcy courts were frozen for periods of time. And so we're seeing some of that wash through the system. But I got to tell you, still 17% of small businesses are saying that they are at risk of permanent closure. Only half of businesses have got their sales back to pre-pandemic or 2019 levels. Debt is through the roof in many businesses because they had to borrow money to get through the last couple of years. The average is $114,000. So no shock that there are businesses that are running out of rope. They're saying, I'm trying to get my business back on track, but I'm not able to outrun my creditors, so they're declaring bankruptcy. The other point to note here, Mario, is that for every one business that declares bankruptcy through the formal process, that's not the sum total of business failures. 9 businesses quietly close their doors. They don't go through bankruptcy proceedings, but they just shut her down, wind down in some fashion. The business is nonetheless gone too.
Let me just ask, about the last couple of years. Obviously, there was a lot of government support programs in place, kept probably very many businesses afloat. However, payback times come, right?
Yeah, and the big one, of course, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and rent subsidy, those ended some time ago. But the big one that's coming up is the deadline to repay your Canada Emergency Business Account loan, the CEBA loans, as they're called. 900,000 businesses have a loan backstopped by the federal government, delivered through their bank. The loans are either $40,000 or $60,000. There's a forgivable chunk on the line. But tons of businesses are saying they just don't have the money to repay the balance of those loans and are unlikely to have it by December 31st of this year, which is the new deadline. And while Ottawa did give us an extra year, we believe that there needs to be an extra couple of years. Really, we're asking the Deputy Prime Minister to push this out to the end of 2024 before requiring full repayment, to give businesses more time to repay that debt. Until their sales return, I don't know how many of these firms are going to do it.
So, outside of that kind of leniency, I guess, with repayment, what else would, as a federation, there are businesses across the country, what else would you like to see in place or government do to help and support small business through this time?
Well, look, first, the government's going to have to stop making this worse. We're just on the heels of a huge increase in Canada pension plan premiums, a modest increase in employment insurance premiums, and then, of course, just about a month and a half from now, we have an increase in carbon taxes in most provinces across Canada, including Alberta and Ontario. So that is deeply worrisome. And if we put some of those tax hikes on freeze, that on hold, that will help some businesses make it. As I mentioned, the CEBA loans, perhaps forgiving a larger chunk of those loans, we've suggested up to 50% be forgiven, delaying the full repayment deadline till the end of 2024. That would help. But another file that we're pushing for, including right now, is to provide some cost relief to businesses. And one of the ways government could do that is by putting the fast track on reducing credit card processing fees. That's a file that was committed 2 years ago and repeated in the fall economic statement. We're hoping to see some progress on that very soon, hopefully as soon as the 2023 budget.
Can you talk a little bit about the credit card issue? Maybe explain it for everyone else out there.
Sure.
What the issue is.
Yeah, look, I think, all of us that use credit cards know that you often, if you have a premium card, a card that gives you points, you often pay an annual fee, perhaps $100 or $500 for some of the super premium ones. And then, of course, there's a fee to you as a consumer if you carry a balance. You pay interest to the bank if you carry a balance and you're not able to pay it off month after month. Um, but what a lot of consumers don't know, of course, is that the merchants also pay a huge chunk of fees for the courtesy of you using your credit card in their business.
Yeah.
Business owners know that there's value there, that of course they get an immediate payment. They're confident that they will be paid in most cases. But these fees in Canada are way higher than in most other jurisdictions across the country, across the world, certainly higher than Europe and Australia, New Zealand. And so we've called on the government to take further action to lower these fees. Our belief, and we just put out something today, Mario, on this, we've suggested that these fees be no more than 1% of the total sale. Right now, businesses are paying somewhere between 1.5% to 2.5% of the sale. And that's fees that go to the banks. There's another slice that goes to the credit card processor, and then a third slice that goes to Visa and MasterCard directly.
Yeah.
If we could get all those chunks down to below 1%, that would provide real relief to merchants, to keep a little bit more cash in the business itself. And I think it would improve fairness, according to the small, medium-sized businesses that we represent.
Okay, so Dan, we've been through this for 3 years now, a really challenging time. What's your sense of the mood of Canadian small business owners right now compared to what it has been over this 3-year period?
Well, I have to tell you, it was for most of 2022 really, really bleak, because of course you'll remember that there were all those all those forecasts that as we got out of the pandemic, consumers would be armed with all this cash and they'd be flooding into businesses, crawling out of their basements to go and spend. Well, if that was happening, it sure wasn't coming to the small and medium-sized businesses that they left as the pandemic restrictions kicked in. So that really didn't materialize. Businesses are deeply below where their sales forecasts are in many cases. And even those that are successful or were successful in getting their customers back, they've struggled because of huge cost increases. We are starting to see some positive messaging, though, that perhaps there won't be further interest rate hikes in the near term. Supply chain issues, they seem to be easing in some circles, so that is good news. And just as the year turned, there started to be a bit more optimism that we might have a bit of a softer economic landing than perhaps was expected in 2022. If that happens, if those trends continue, maybe we'll have put the worst of this behind us. But to that earlier discussion, there still are a lot of business failures yet to come. We're hoping that will be met with new opportunities for more entrepreneurs to enter the business community in Canada. But there's a lot of work to do before that happens. And so it's a bit of a mixed bag.
All right. Thanks, Dan, for joining us today.
Anytime at all, Murray.
All right. That was Dan Kelly, who is president and CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's podcast, Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.